Hi, it's Tracy from CETA in the Chamber here with today's FAQ. We are starting to see the EIDL advances come through for businesses that had applied previously, and we're also starting to see PPP loans be dispersed. So it's really great news to see those resources actually get into the hands of businesses and nonprofits in our community and put to good use. But with that, especially with the Paycheck Protection Program or PPP, there's still some questions about the forgiveness portion of that program. Unfortunately, the guidelines aren't fully fleshed out yet and aren't fully in place, but there are some recommendations on how to try to prepare for that despite not knowing exactly how that process will go. I will say that I am not an accountant, I'm not a banker, I'm not a lawyer, so these are just recommendations and you should really work with the experts that you have around you to decide what is best for your business. However, in preparing for the forgiveness of PPP, one thing that you might want to consider is putting that loan fund or putting the funds from that loan into their own bank account. That will make it easier to track that money down the road and make sure and show exactly where that money went, because there's no commingling of funds. And there won't be any situations where you can question, what money really paid for what expense. Another option might be is if you have a dedicated payroll checking account or payroll account, put the money directly into there. If you're going to be using it entirely for payroll, that might just be the easiest option. Another thing to keep track of is where you are in terms of utilizing that funding for payroll. Right now, the standard is that you have to use 75% of the forgiven portion on payroll. So if you really want to maximize the forgiveness, you have to make sure you're using at least 75% of the funding for payroll expenses. So make sure you're tracking that and that those other forgivable expenses don't eke over that 25% line, and so that you don't end up having a portion left over at the end to repay. The last thing you might want to consider is, how you're documenting the use of those funds. So document. This is a scenario where having the documents and not needing them is better than not having them and needing them. You don't know exactly what documentation is going to be needed, but make sure to keep those payroll registers handy, get receipts for anything, get confirmations for anything you're paying for out of the PPP funds. It is likely that there's going to be documentation required, but again, better to have it and not need it. So that's all for today. Hopefully it's helpful as you start to get into the PPP process. And as that guidance develops, we'll make sure to keep you informed. So have a great day, and we'll see you again soon.